Hello there, I'm Scott Mercer and this is a podcast called Gimme Empathy. But you knew that already, didn't you? Maybe you didn't. Maybe you clicked on this blindly. I've given a personal update lately. I've just been busy doing the same thing, week in, week out, work, radio, podcast, bands, keeping very busy and making things. And I had a dream the other night that I was playing a video game, which is something I very much enjoyed doing when I was younger. I haven't played games for quite a while, been too busy making things. But I had a dream I was playing I think it was a big open world game. It looked kind of like Red Dead Redemption, which is set in the Old West, even though I've never actually played that game. And I was at the top of a hill, and I just had a horizon of possibilities in front of me and 2 6-guns at my hip and one of those cowboy hats on my head. And I started walking down the hill towards the next objective marker like you have in video games. There were all these things I could do that could be ticked off a list, and I'd be rewarded for doing these things. There'd be a big green stamp on that part of the map, or money or equipment in game, or maybe I could get a horse. And as I was walking down the hill, you know when sometimes details of the real world interferes with your knowledge of your dream? So I knew I was in a video game in my dream, and I remembered that my computer isn't very good, and the hard drive I keep games on has been dying for a while in the real world. And in the dream, it started to slow down and glitch out, and the frame rate began to start, and I was like, oh no, damn. I have to remind myself sometimes that the things I'm doing in the real world don't have the big green stamps, and they don't have the gold rewards and all that sort of thing. But they're really probably more worth doing. Making things in the real world, I guess, is obvious, is more worth doing than shooting 10 bobcats in a virtual world. So it can be hard to remember that sometimes when you do lots of things. I got to talking a bit about this subject with the guest of this episode, Andrew Leavold, at one point. And he's someone who's very, very driven and has always made lots and lots of things. You might know him as the proprietor of Trash Video, which was a cult video store here in Brisbane that ran for 15 years. First under the zoo in the Valley, and then later on Vulture Street in West End, where the bar The End is now. He's done so much. He's been in a bunch of bands, including fronting the Vagina Billies. He used to host intros for B-movies on Brisbane's community TV station, Bris 31, Schlock Treatment. He's directed shorts and feature films, including The Search for Weng Weng, which was a documentary about a 2'9" actor from the Philippines who starred in a series of action comedies in the 1980s. Andrew is a great storyteller. He's a real raconteur. He's a hustler. He's one of these people you just kind of sit down and wind up. I didn't really have to do much interviewing at all. It was pretty smooth going, although I think I struck a nerve at one point when I mentioned Quentin Tarantino, who is that other former video store guy and who Andrew is not a big fan of. I first remember Andrew from when I worked at a convenience store around the corner from Trash Video in West End. I used to work the graveyard shift there, and Andrew would come in after finishing up with the shop on Saturday nights. I never really said much to him at the time, but I did clock him as the guy from the video shop. And then last year, I interviewed him over the phone for Fortune Z, and then later ran into him at a few gigs. We have a few friends in common, which is how I was able to set this up. We recorded this on the night of River Fire. I clearly hadn't learned my lesson from last year after the Nick Oberhart episode, which was also interrupted by fighter jet flybys. If you're not familiar with River Fire, it's a night of fireworks and inexplicable Air Force hardware on display over the Brisbane River. So sorry about that interruption. Speaking of interruptions, no more from me. Here's episode 44 of Gimme Empathy with Andrew Leavold. So I remember going to Trash Video back when I was a teenager.
Are we recording?
Yeah.
Oh, Shit. Okay.
No, that's all right. No,
Oops.
that's how I like it.
Okay.
Just leap in.
All right.
I remember going this would have been early 2000s, and one of my friends was like into all the counterculture weird stuff. So like really into like Frank Zappa and Jim Jarmusch movies and stuff. And he loved going into trash and getting weird old stuff. And I don't remember you specifically from that point, but I definitely remember some of the weird movies like we'd rent and watch at sleepovers. There's one called Chicken Park. Do you remember that? It was a parody of Jurassic Park.
I do remember it, yeah.
Quite low budget.
Kind of like almost like a Leslie Nielsen style spoof.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that.
There's that. There was Massacre at Dinosaur Valley.
Oh my God.
Which is a very misleading title.
Exactly. I think it was trying to be an Italian cannibal film, but they forgot the cannibals. Very disappointing. I did a pop-up video shop in the Valley last weekend, and 3 guys in their mid to late 20s all said to me, your TV show back in the 2000s was responsible for what they were as adults now. You know, they said and this is like all 3 of them separately said we would sit up and watch these crazy Mexican wrestling horror movies or Egyptian softcore porn horror films. I mean, it was basically crazy shit from all over the world that I managed to source and hope that no one noticed that we were blatantly violating copyright regulations. But it was just, you know, weird shit 101, basically, every weekend. And they all said, you know, it changed the way that they looked at cinema. And I can only imagine that the video shop did the same thing too, which is incredibly gratifying. I mean, you know, we were a conduit through which crazed film culture was able to seep into the Brisbane, well, not exactly mainstream, but at least into the water supply.
And when you hear stories like that, like how do you feel as one responsible for that?
I think it's fantastic. I mean, you know, I need to feel less alone in the world. I need to know that there's more weirdos like me. And if I have to manufacture weirdos, then so be it. You know, do it through schlock treatment or do it through trash video or through all the various other channels. But it's about propagating an idea, and that is that normal or cool culture, as most of us perceive it, is bullshit. It's serving someone. It's serving the cool gatekeepers, or it's serving the, you know, people like Stan Lee, you know, or you know, the heads of 20th Century Fox. Most of what we consider is good is drip fed to us and isn't good at all. It is usually hollow or flavorless, has no substance to it whatsoever, and is in essence horseshit. We're being fed horseshit. So I kind of worked out from an early age that we are being fed shit, and so let's look for the good shit instead. If you assume that 99% of everything is shit, then at least look for the good shit. And that's what I've been trying to push onto people as a shit peddler for the last 20-something years.
Well, how did you figure that out at a young age? What was your trash video?
My trash video was a series of Arab holes in the wall in the late 70s, early 80s, while I was in primary school in the Middle East. I think 1979 was really when Betamax first hit. And almost overnight, about 20 video stores sprung up in my neighborhood. And back then it was just whatever they were able to bootleg off British TV or videotape off a cinema screen. and then bootleg among themselves. So, if you went to the wrong shop, you'd be watching a 10th generation bootleg of The Exorcist, something like that, something outrageous. A lot of Indian stuff, a lot of Lebanese and Egyptian stuff, obviously being in an Arab country, but also new releases of films that had debuted at the cinema in London about, a week before, had been couriered across to the Middle East, and we were watching it a week later around this chain of bootleg boutiques. I still remember, and I shouldn't be admitting to this at all, but my first ever paid bootleg job, first of thousands, was Return of the Jedi in 1983. I managed to get hold of the Betamax bootleg, and I was charging something like $15, like the equivalent of $15 back then, for a Betamax copy of Return of the Jedi, which didn't make it to Australian cinemas until after I'd moved back from the Middle East in 83 and started going to high school in Toowoomba.
What were you doing in the Middle East as a kid?
Dad was a civil engineer. Mum would work various jobs. And I would go to expat schools, usually with British or American kids. And most of the time I was left to my own devices since both parents worked. So I learnt to ride a bicycle very early, just so I could go to the video shops that were just outside of walking range. And then I would get a shopping bag full of, R-rated movies because, I was an adventurous little kid. And I would sit there while my parents were at work and just watch the most ghastly horror films, biker movies, 70s action films, sexploitation, whatever I could get away with, until my mother walked in on me watching Humanoids from the Deep. And there's a scene where a little aquatic monster fetus bursts its way through a pregnant woman's stomach. And there I was, 11 years old going, oh my God, this is awesome. My mom walked in and said, no more. So she wrote letters to every video shop I was a member of and said, do not give my son any more R-rated movies. And that included horror films and everything else. So, of course, most of the Indian or Pakistani or Arab video clerks ignored the letter and would recommend me films and say, just don't tell your mother. And I'm sure that experience contributed to the idea of, cinema as taboo, as something that was meant to be hidden or...
You had to fight to access the good stuff.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And that continued on too. When I came back to Australia and walked into a legitimate video shop, with actual covers and legal tapes, legally released tapes. I walked into this video shop in Toowoomba and went, what the fuck where's Clockwork Orange? Where's all the good stuff that I had access to, albeit on pirate videotapes. And the shock of walking into an Australian video store was too much for my poor little 13-year-old head. And I went into, I think, a deep filmic depression and immediately started plotting, age 13, my dream video shop where all of the videos that I personally thought should be on a video shelf were there in order.
You had that idea at 13.
Very OCD, I understand. Yeah, but at 13, I think probably even when I was in the Middle East, I thought, if I go back to Australia, I'm going to have my own video shop. And about 12 years after 1983, so 1995, I opened Trash Video Mark 1 under the zoo in Fortitude Valley. December 1995, the Onyas played the opening night party. We all got incredibly drunk, and my girlfriend at the time served chocolate biscuits in the shape of of Poos. It was our tribute to Salo.
The 120 Days of Sodom, that movie?
120 Days of Sodom, that's right.
In between there, though, like you played in bands in the 80s and
Oh,
90s.
yeah. I mean, I was on the Sunshine Coast growing up, going to high school in Nambour with the 6 Foot Hick guys, weirdly enough. I was in the same year as their sister Lisa. And we were constantly trying to vie for the English prize, because we were both word nerds. And the first band I was in, I think, was grade 10, maybe even the start of grade 11. I was in this punk band called Fetal Tracks. And we played a social and a couple of talent quests until they decided that we were just terrible people and actually banned us from doing anything school-related ever again. I think that was shortly after I kicked the school drum kit, the $3,000 drum kit, off the stage, and we did a song called Cunt Cancer. We were destined to fail.
And you were always a drummer in these bands?
Always a drummer, because I was terrified of being a front man. And that continued all the way through the 1990s as well. So I finished up at high school, went to uni, did film and they called it rhetoric and communication at UQ back then, with a film theory component. And eventually I started playing in bands again, drumming in bands from the early 90s, just really questionable bands. Like there was one called Mr. Bastard that, was just an abomination. We were all on one kind of drug or another. I mean, my drug of choice back then was beer. Someone else was a heroin addict. Someone else was a chronic pothead. Someone else was constantly on LSD. And so when we got on stage together, we were in 4 separate universes. I don't know how the hell that managed to string together. That was Roland Bishop, one of Roland Bishop's first bands too. He was our heavy metal guitarist for a couple of years.
Did you have an idea in mind of what you actually wanted to do for like a job?
Well, the job came fairly quickly after uni. The day job was after 6 months of sitting on the dole. I managed to score a job at Social Security, so Centrelink. And I thought that was hilarious. After having fronted up for 6 months, now I was basically jumping the counter and getting to use their photocopy machines, which I did with gusto.
Like the gig posters and stuff?
Gig posters to start with. And then also at the same time I was doing a fanzine called Stumpy. That's where I got my unfortunate nickname.
Right.
So I was ringing up musicians in Sydney and Melbourne doing phone interviews,
While you're at the...
running up huge phone bills on Social Security's dime, using their photocopy machines, planning gigs, turning up late to work because I was hungover from the night before, doing these stupid Wednesday night gigs, and generally making a total jerk of myself for the 5-6 years I was there until I started the video shop in 1995. I quit Centrelink in early 97. There was a good 13-month period where I was going to work during the day and then going into the valley and working the counter at Trash Video until 9, doing all day Saturday and all day Sunday. At some point at the end of that 13-month period, my brain had a complete flip. And I don't know, I think that was the start of a long process of dealing with anxiety and constantly shifting brain chemistry. But that was I think a minor freak out, which seemed to grow in intensity whenever I would have freakouts for the next 15 years while the shop was in existence. Anyway, going back to the bands, there was Mr. Bastard. I was also doing a band with Cal and Monty, who ran a record label with me called Malignant. We put out a few records, including our own band's 7-inch. We were in a band called Queer. We did a compilation called Fuck the White Race, a Malignant Christmas collection. basically all the Brisbane noise bands at the time, some punk, some bands from down south like Venom P. Stinger. I'm pretty sure Not From There wasn't on the compilation, but Monty and I put out their first EP through Malignant called Valid to 615 or something like that. But they'd just arrived in town. Heinz had just come in from Europe, and Monty and I were one of, I think, 4 people at their first gig in the Valley, and Monty signed them up straight away, said, "You guys are fantastic." So that was our own little modest contribution to the Brisbane music scene.
Have you always had that many projects on the go?
Oh, shit, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
God, yes. That's a very good question. I think part of it is, well, I ended up going to a shrink for a while when the shop got a little bit too much for the brain. And the shrink's assessment was a child of 2 alcoholic parents tends to be a chronic overachiever because you are constantly screaming to, all of these faceless would-be parental figures, "Love me, look at what I've done, look at me, I'm smart, I'm achieving all the things." And of course, most people don't give a shit, including your parents when they were passed out somewhere and you're trying to do a little tap dance to get their attention. I think that had a lasting effect on my inability to sit still or constantly needing to feel like I'm doing something.
So your parents' alcoholism, was it really bad? Like, were they non-functional?
They ceased functioning after about 8 p.m.
Right.
And so I would see this transformation in my parents from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde on a nightly basis. And that was pretty rough.
Were they abusive?
No, they were pretty happy drunks. They just didn't make me very happy.
Right.
So they were having the time of their lives, what they could remember of it. But I started dreaming of monsters from a very early age, and vengeful gods as well. Lots of dreams about gods striking me dead. And I wasn't even religious, nor were my parents, but the paternal figure started taking on quite a sinister tinge.
Do you have siblings?
No. So, only child of 2 alcoholic parents. That's you're the focal point of all of their dreams and disappointments.
Have they proven to be ultimately proud of all this stuff you have?
Oh
achieved?
yeah, of course. And when they stopped drinking more than a decade ago, they started having moments of clarity, and they admitted that their behavior may have had an effect on me and apologized. And I said, well, really, there's nothing to apologize because, when you examine things, if you changed anything in the landscape leading up to this moment right now, then we wouldn't be sitting here talking about things, and I wouldn't be able to reflect in the same way on how everything that has happened to me up until this moment has made me the person that I am. And I'm pretty damn happy with the way I am right now. I wouldn't change a damn thing.
So given that you kind of got that closure, that resolution with your parents, why do you think...
Dad passed away soon after.
Oh, okay.
And so that was a bit rough. There's I think clearly a lot of unfinished business there.
Right.
But I'm fairly close. I mean, I'm very close with my mom. I'm more or less keeping an eye on her now that she's in her early 80s. One of the reasons why I don't live in Brisbane anymore. I live on the Sunshine Coast, and I'm essentially being the muscle and company, and we talk and reflect and have a very close relationship.
And so even though you've got your head around all of this,
Right.
you still have that drive
Well,
to make things and have people.
well, yeah, of course, because what would I do if I wasn't doing something? I'd be sitting around watching television with an open jaw, probably putting in my lotto or watching the footy or something like that. I mean, I have to remain engaged because that's how my brain is wired.
You don't ever wish for that though.
What, wish for the angry bees in my head to stop buzzing?
Yeah.
No. Oh God, no. No. I mean, I feel like I'm getting stuff done, and not being Protestant. Well, technically I'm Protestant, but not having that Calvinistic work ethic, having that work ethic derived from somewhere else. I still need to feel like I'm doing something, or else I'm just bored. It's not that I feel less worthwhile. It's just that I find non-activity dull.
So getting back to the start of the shop, did you have any idea how to run a small business?
I did a TAFE course for about 6 weeks, and it taught me how to do tax. I quickly forgot that. It touched on computers. I then bought a computer. It didn't really work, so that sat on the counter for about 5 years doing nothing while I fiddled around with like filing cards in a metal box. I went in completely clueless. And I emerged from that first version of Trash Video 5 years later, before moving to West End, probably as clueless as when I started. But what I did have...
Sorry, that's the... We're doing this on the night of Riverfire, ladies and gentlemen. So that's a display of one of the things Andrew would be staring at slack-jawed if he wasn't creating things as we speak.
Oh my God, look at the big airplane.
So the first location for Trash, what was the valley like in the 90s?
It was brilliant. In fact, I ran into Tam Patton around the corner at Stone's Corner a couple of hours ago. Tam, you might remember, worked in Rocking Horse for ages. His father owned and operated Bent Books in West End back in the early 2000s. Before that, they were located in the same strip of shops that the original Trash Video was in, on that little stretch of Ann Street in Fortitude Valley. And I was saying to Tam just before, there was that original 6-pack of shops under the zoo. From the corner, Scrabble, run by Nicole from Minimum Chips, Silver Rocket, James Straker's toy shop, Kleptomania, old 50s furniture and collectibles, then the stairwell, then Trash Video, Blonde Venus, and Bent Books. And it was a great excuse to go to the valley. I mean, back then you still had Lucky's Trattoria, the mafia restaurant, just up from the strip club. There was the Chinese mafia, the Vietnamese mafia, the other Italian mafia joints along Brunswick Street Mall. And it was a genuinely dangerous place. Over the course of the 5 years that Trash Video was on Ann Street, it changed. I remember at one point in 2000, just before I decided to close down and move to West End. Meow. Go Roger Ramjet. I remember looking across the road, and there was near the Jesus is your fiend sign, there was a homeware shop selling like $40 can openers. And I thought, man, the writing is on the wall. Jesus is your fiend. It's true. And it was time to get the hell out of the valley. It was starting to gentrify in a really disconcerting way to me. The area started becoming a lot safer to go at night. This is before people were getting king hit, waiting for the taxis. But to have a retail outlet, it was the sort of people that we were getting to the shop were now going up to, Blockbuster Video in New Farm. We'd lost our core clientele. So it was time to look for an investor. If I couldn't find an investor to take the shop elsewhere, then I was prepared to close down and look for a real job. Luckily, I put an email out to our customers, and within a day, I got an email back from someone saying, "You need 30 grand? Maybe I can help." And all of a sudden, Trash Mark 2 opened December 2000 on Vulture Street in West End.
One of your customers had 30 grand to sink into the shop.
Yep.
Wow.
I know. The fool. I'm not sure if he ever saw a cent out of his investment, because, the shop ended up closing down 10 years with spiraling debts. And by 2010, I was borrowing money just to pay the ground rent. I couldn't pay myself a wage. In fact, I didn't pay myself a wage, I think, for about the final 2 years.
How did you live?
I had a very understanding girlfriend.
Once it moved, did you find the clientele that had gone to Blockbuster, were they still in West End?
No, we started cultivating a more of a West End, Highgate Hill clientele, which was perfect because early 2000s West End is a lot different than it is now. You did have the big student population. There was still a massive migrant population who would want foreign language films. You'd get a lot of older Greek customers who just loved old war films and westerns. And we were able to expand the range to take it beyond the sort of B-grade horror and weird art house to classics, Australian animation. Australiana was a big draw card.
Did your own tastes kind of expand? So did you do a lot of research into all this new
absolutely.
stuff?
Yeah, because I went into trash as a wide-eyed enthusiast, age 25. I emerged age 40 when I finally closed the doors as a battle-scarred but much deeper watched 40-year-old.
At what point did it occur to you that you wanted to be involved in the making of films as well?
I think, if you can imagine that when I was in the Middle East and I was dreaming of my video shop, there were two other dreams. One of them was really want to be in a band. And, by my late teens, early 20s, I'd pretty much lived that fantasy. Have my own video shop, tick, but I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to make a feature film. And I had no idea how I was going to do it. Even though I'd done film theory at Queensland Uni, it didn't give you the practical knowledge to be able to take whatever was in your brain and to put that on the screen.
It was more an academic, I don't know, if you want to be a film critic or something, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you wanted to be lazy and write about film.
And you did that as well.
Which I have done as well.
You wrote for Bums in the early 90s?
Oh, that was, I think, my first published writing gig was about 91, writing for Bums. Yeah. And, my first conversation with Cal Crilly was, I think, for the Bums interview that I did with Alien Virus. It's kind of neat when you look back at all of that early writing and the reverberative effect that those conversations would have on my subsequent life. It's all there in magazine or fanzine or stumpy zine form.
What kind of things did you take away from those interviews?
A stronger appreciation of DIY culture, and the tools to be able to do it myself. Not do it yourself, but do it myself. I would look at the way people did handbills and draw inspiration to do my own. I'd talk to guys doing fanzines, dreaming about the day that I would have my own zine. And then, of course, networking compulsively with all of the band people who would then end up forming the core of my early bands. So when I actually look back at it, it's that early period, 90, 91, 92 was basically me gathering my ducks, gathering the troops. And from 92, I was playing in bands, putting out zines, basically living out that fantasy of being very much part of that music culture, that band scene at the time, which I'd only been an outsider or an observer of leading up to that point.
And I guess being able to connect with people and assemble people like that is especially important for filmmaking because it's such a collaborative.
Oh yeah. Well, in fact, I would argue that film is one of the most complicated and collaborative efforts that you could ever try to put together because of the complex and interconnected nature of all of the various art forms contained within it. I mean, you've got prose and montage, music, metaphor, and even down to poster design. Everybody plays their essential part in there, and pretty much, like you would have been doing in the DIY scene back in the early 90s. You're now doing that, but on a much grander and much more international scale. But you can see echoes back in those formative years. And I think that's the benefit of getting older and gaining hindsight and recognizing exactly what you were up to, even though you were running around like a pork chop at the time. You were training yourself.
And you can assign significance to it now.
Oh,
absolutely. See where it
absolutely.
led you. Yeah.
And, that's why, man, I feel like I should have a pair of slippers and a cardigan and make more scratching noises as I stroke my beard talking about, when I was a young man, much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help. Well, that was bullshit.
If you keep doing that, I'm going to need to edit that out. Otherwise, I'll get sued. So, what was the first film project that you did? Was it a short?
No, it was a feature.
Lesbo a Go-Go, was that the first?
Lesbo a Go-Go was my first attempt at doing a film. I thought I would make the Brisbane rock and roll movie, but not as a kind of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls kind of thing. Instead, I decided to do a 60s style roughie. So basically an adult feature from the 60s, but do it with all of the guys who were in bands with me or who were around me at the time, not realizing, of course, that I got the joke, but no one else would.
Right.
Doing a tribute to 60s adult filmmaker Doris Wishman seemed like a fantastic idea, but no one got the references except me and maybe two other people that I'd forced to watch Doris Wishman films with.
Is that always really important, though? Because, I mean, arguably, like Tarantino does that. Like, most people don't get what he's referencing, but they like the assemblage of...
Well, what Tarantino does is pull out a whole bunch of obscure names out of a hat. And he goes, oh my God, look at this. This is awesome. I'm like the first person who's ever discovered this shit. And because he's surrounded by this army of acolytes, they immediately, run to IMDb, download the films, watch them and go, oh, well, of course, we'd known about those films all along. So it's alpha jerks like Tarantino who's able to get away with that stuff because of the degree of support that he has around him. I don't have those acolytes. I'm alone. I'm the guy out there in the street, screaming at buses, yelling into the abyss. I'm sure it would be great to be like Tarantino and have 1,000 minions stroking your ego at every given moment. But god damn, what a fucking tedious life that would be. So I'm happy to scream at buses. And one day, maybe I'll get an ounce of the attention that Tarantino gets, and I'll be really grateful for it.
So how did you find the production, the making of Lesbo a Go-Go?
Oh, it was a shambles. I mean, I really was a babe in the woods at the time. I thought that if you just pulled the camera out, point and shot, and had people doing things that you had just described to them, like a moment before when you pulled out this makeshift script, everything would magically fall together. Well, yeah, apparently not. And when it came time to editing this 6 months dog's breakfast of a shoot together, there was such things as continuity, and we hadn't shot any sound. I mean, that was a Doris Wishman thing. We had to completely make up the entire soundtrack, including like air and running sounds on graves, that sort of thing. We had to invent everything from scratch. So that was painful. And then came the time to actually unveil it to Melbourne Underground Film Festival. We all flew down, and none of us had actually seen it.
You hadn't seen it?
I'd seen parts of it while it was being assembled, but I hadn't actually seen it all the way through.
You're the director, right?
Yeah, I know, but we were working right down to the wire.
Oh, okay.
I mean, essentially it was burning onto a mini DV tape until 10 minutes before I had to jump in a cab to go to the airport to go to Melbourne for the premiere. We screened it, and I was sitting there going, oh my God, this is rough. But, enough people saw something in it to apparently make it worthwhile. Then we trimmed a bit more of it, screened it in at the Dendy in George Street in 2003. And I think we made about $1,200 off the door. That was more than double the entire film budget of, I think we worked out it was about $500 to shoot.
So I guess a lot of people were working for free on that.
Working for free. We paid someone in bourbon. I can't remember. I think I drank most of that.
Were you paying if you pay yourself in bourbon to make a film, I don't think that counts as pay, Andrew.
We can't count that as part of the budget. No, but that was during a particularly difficult shoot where we were in Toowong Cemetery, and we thought we were going to have to get a spade and make a new grave for the mourners to stand around. Luckily, we found a pauper's grave. So I mounted dirt with a little wooden cross. The problem was that you could see the person's name written across the wooden cross as we shot it from the base of the grave. So I just walked across, picked the wooden cross out of the grave, turned it around, stuck it back into the soil. You could hear everyone go, and right at that moment, this weird little luminescent green bug sort of crawled from the dirt on the bottom of the cross up the cross, and then I think it was sitting there on the crossbeam staring at me accusingly. This little imp from hell.
I think you sent someone to purgatory, Andrew.
I believe so. Probably me. I think we're in hell's waiting room right now.
This is your punishment. You have to recount your sins.
This is going to be my 3,000 year podcast.
Yeah.
recounting every misdeed over and over and over again until I go, oh, shit. I don't think I should have done that. Maybe that was a bad idea. Oh, well, what are you going to do? Who are you going to turn to?
So how soon after Lesbo A Go-Go was done did you think, I want to do that again?
Well, it took a few years. And by this time it was 2006, so 3 years after Lesbo. And I had attempted to do a few things before that. There was an attempt at doing a trailer for a biker film called Birds of Destruction. I got 3 days into that and then decided that I was no better than Tarantino. Just taking a genre and doing a homage, decided that made me, completely bankrupt as a creative individual. So I abandoned it. Then Gazunga Attack got me to do a film clip for them, which ended up in 1,000 pieces. I think I went crazy in 2006, and so it didn't end up getting edited. And then Ellie the singer took the footage away from me and burnt it. I think it was nuts. It was like this party from hell going on in a motel room. And people were going absolutely like feral during this shoot. A lot of fun. Lot of alcohol during that shoot. And I also had this 70-year-old guy with pegs on his nipples watching Christian puppet cinema in the next room. So that was one of the scenes in the film clip. Everyone involved, keep asking me, where the hell is that footage? And I think it's in New York in a bin somewhere. Sadly. Anyway, so that was another aborted project. But then a guy gave me $1,000 to do a low-budget film based on the West End lesbian vampire murder.
Which was it's kind of an urban legend that was sort of true.
No, it wasn't an urban legend at all. Everything about it was true.
Well, like I heard things about it, like in
it
primary
sounded
school.
like an urban legend.
Yeah, so for those not familiar, there was I'm sure you'll fill me on the details, but there was a murder that happened in, I think, Hill End, and 2 women who were said to be vampires exsanguinated a 3rd woman and killed her.
No, a 50-year-old family man.
Right. Okay. Well, that's just what I heard in
which apparently, like, to straight society makes it even more ghastly.
Yeah.
They picked up a guy outside the Waterloo Hotel, Tracy and a girlfriend, and these 2 would-be goth vampires. So 4 girls in a car, and a guy in his 50s, drunk as the Lord, drove him to Davies Park in West End. Davies Park? The one near the ferry.
Orley Park?
Beg your pardon, Orley Park. And Tracy stabbed the guy in the neck about 26 times until his head almost flipped like it was on a hinge. And she drank the guy's blood. Offered her girlfriend to join her. I think the other 2 freaked out. They all went back to their respective homes, and within 12 hours of the body being discovered in the park, they'd all kind of ratted each other out. And so that was the end of that. Tracy, I think she's been released. I can't say for sure, but I know that she had been in prison for at least 20 years. And by the time we made the West End, our version of the West End lesbian vampire killing, she'd been in prison for about 17 years, I think. She asked for a copy of the film.
Did you meet her?
No, but I met her representative from Sisters Inside. And she said, yeah, that's fine. It actually says at the beginning, a 50-year-old gentleman was stabbed multiple times by Tracy Wigginton and her coven of would-be vampires. This is not their story.
Right, okay.
So apparently we got away with it, and we changed the details just slightly.
But you were shooting at the actual location.
We actually went to Orley Park and shot it. Shot part of the murder scene there. The other part was in Ashington Street in near Orley Park.
So is this a short or a feature?
It's about 22 minutes long. It's a long short. The idea was to use the camera as the fourth killer. So there are the two main girls, a girl that they pick up at Black Bear Lodge. That was the troubadour at the time. And then the camera is the fourth person in the party. They pick up a guy, stab him, drink the blood, and then the film, along with their personalities, starts to fragment. So it was very much like it's my version of a Dogma 95 film. Pretentious as hell and almost completely improvised, aside from a very threadbare scene breakdown. I think the entire script was about 3 pages. And I had no idea how long the film was going to be. It ended up editing down nicely to 22 minutes. So it's basically unreleasable. You can't do film festivals with a 22-minute film.
Aren't there short film festivals?
Shorts classified as 15 minutes or under.
Oh, man.
So I screwed myself again. Another blatant act of self-sabotage.
That would fit as like an anthology TV series or something?
Yeah, like TV's ever going to play this damn thing. Yeah. But it was, I mean, I personally think it's quite effective. The conceit of having the camera as the fourth killer doesn't really work. You got a lot of people basically yelling at a camera, but the performances are great. The two lead vampires, Star and Lisa, they used to be around the band scene a lot in the early 2000s. Star used to play in Legions of Mary and the Nobodies. She's a crazy girl, and she didn't need to act. I mean, she was basically Star in the film. And I have a real, soft spot for the film, but I can't really play it to anyone because, again, no one really gets what I was up to. I was trying to do a film based on occult principles. The idea that there is no good or evil, that there are just, perceptions of good and evil.
Had you learned lessons from Lesbo a Go-Go in terms of like production and getting organization?
Well, I think at that stage I was experimenting, like writers talk about. You're trying to find a voice. So sometimes you experiment with different voices, seeing if it fits. Doing something like Lesbo a Go-Go, that wasn't clearly my voice. That was someone else's voice. That was a would-be Doris Wishman thing. I learned the lesson there to not try to ape someone else. With Bluebirds, the vampire film, it was don't abandon all control and don't be such a pretentious motherfucker, because it didn't suit me. Almost immediately after Bluebirds screened, I went to the Philippines for the very first time, took a camera with me, and I'd been obsessed with that 2'9" James Bond of the Philippines, Weng Weng, for the best part of 15 years leading up to that moment. So I thought, all right, I'm going to be in the Philippines. Let's see if I can find anything about this elusive character, Weng Weng.
Well, let's go back about this. Like, how did you first come across the oeuvre of Weng Weng?
Oh, it was on a bootleg of a bootleg of a bootleg of a bootleg of a film called For Your Height Only, right? which in weird film circles was one of the holy grails. So I finally tracked it down through a friend of mine, watched it with my jaw on the carpet, seeing this absurdist kung fu spoof from clearly the Philippines, because there's pictures of Imelda and Ferdinand Marcos all over the walls. And I later discovered that it was only a country like the Philippines that could make a film such as Weng Weng's. And I think that was the first conscious moment of seeing a film from the Philippines.
And he was a megastar back in the day.
For a very brief period. Yeah.
So this is like 70s and 80s?
end of the 70s into the early 80s.
Right.
Yeah. For Your Height Only, that would have been 81, 82 when that film was at its, at the zenith of its popularity in the Philippines. And it turned out that he fell out of favor, or popular culture moved on very soon after that, and he was almost immediately forgotten. Poor Weng Weng was sent back to the slum that he grew up in, basically to become sicker and more forgotten, and he died in complete anonymity and abject poverty.
Did you know his whole personal story
I knew
from
nothing.
the start?
I didn't know his name. I didn't know how many films he'd made. All I had was this image of a karate kicking 2'9" ladies' man, and I was absolutely hooked. And of course, because there was no information to go with the name Weng Weng whatsoever, that then to the OCD brain became like an instant challenge, a quest, of quite a mystical kind in a way, or as I was to discover it, would end up becoming quite a mystical quest.
So you went to the Philippines in mid 2000s?
2006, yeah.
2006 with a video. Did you think I'm going to make a documentary when you went?
No, I thought I was I was pitching the idea of a TV series at the time, going to some way out places and trying to find sort of iconic stars of each country's B-grade cinema. And the idea was to do one on the Philippines centering on Weng Weng. So I guess the idea was to start doing preliminary shooting or research for what could become an episode in a TV show. This was, on the back of that SBS documentary that they'd made about trash video called Escape from the Planet of the Tapes. So there was talk about maybe doing a follow-up to that documentary, where I'd be involved somehow, hosting a show, talking about obscure B-grade films.
So you go to the Philippines, get a bit of footage, take it back to Australia, shop it around.
Exactly. And, even if that didn't come to anything, I thought maybe I could edit together a 10-minute bonus feature for, a Weng Weng DVD release. Mm. At least, running around Weng's country asking people, do you remember Weng Weng? And, of course, getting the same answer. Who? What? What are you talking about, you crazy, wild-haired foreigner? Go away. So that was, the idea of a feature-length documentary was the furthest thing from my mind at the time. I just wanted to know Weng Weng's story to satisfy my own curiosity. And for ages, who is Weng Weng? It was starting to take over my dreams. I had several dreams about looking for him. In fact, I even dreamt the idea of the documentary. I dreamt in the late 90s that I was in a hotel room in Manila, camera in one hand, phone in the other. And I'm saying to whoever's on the end of the phone, my name is Andrew Leavold. I'm a filmmaker from Australia, and I'm here in Manila doing a documentary about Weng Weng. Woke up and went, wow, what a great idea. Forgot about it. Promptly forgot until I was in Manila and I went, oh my God, I think I dreamt this. And I remembered that dream.
How did you even start once you got to Manila?
Luckily I was moving around film circles. I was there at a film festival showing a 90-minute compilation of, crazy moments from Philippine B films and narrating it live. So I'm in a cinema talking to an audience of, 99% Filipinos, saying, look at these films, look at your crazy fucking cinema. And then I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I can't believe that you're dredging this stuff up. We've tried to block this out. The thing about the Philippines is that in serious film circles, they only like you to talk about the films that reflect well upon them so the art films, the festival successes, that shines favorably upon them as a member of a film culture. You start talking about a 2'9" James Bond, and it makes them look like a bit of a dill. So they believe. Until I try to put a frame around it and say, well, this may look absurd. However, have you considered that this guy is an actual hero? His film took on Hollywood, as a James Bond spoof, ended up being #1 box office in West Indies in 1982. It beat Raiders of the Lost Ark at the box office. And this was a scrappy little Filipino film. I said, this is amazing. This is pioneering stuff. This is chutzpah. Only then do they begrudgingly say, maybe you have a point. Right? So I'm standing in a cinema trying to white-splain to a Filipino audience why they should be taking Weng Weng seriously and me seriously at the same time. And so I start talking to people outside. Oh, do you remember Weng Weng? Oh, so vaguely. Oh my God, Started talking to filmmakers. Did you ever meet Weng Weng? Yes. And I'm pulling out my camera, filming people as they struggle with 20-something years of faltering memories. And I did this for the next week and a half while I was spending my first week and a half in the Philippines. And all of a sudden I was in a car park with the son of one of my favorite directors, Bobby Suarez. He made a film called Cleopatra Wong, which we screened at Brisbane Film Festival in 2006. And Bobby's son says, "Oh man, this is Boy Vignerow. This is the guy who edited my dad's films." So, immediately I pull my camera out. I'm like, wow, editor of Cleopatra Wong. This is amazing. I said, I'm here in Manila doing some research about Weng Weng. Oh, Weng Weng, I edited all of his films too. All of a sudden, there's someone in front of me that I just happened to be filming that had edited 10 of Weng Weng's films. And he started telling me this story. He was treated like a prince. His producers, they let him live in their house, in their mansion, like a prince. And so I started thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. Weng Weng was a success. Weng Weng actually felt successful. Turns out that was the story that everybody believed, but the reality of the story was that the producers had paid Weng Weng little more than pocket money, and as soon as he ceased being useful to them, as soon as they'd made their 15 films and sent him back to his home, he never saw more than pocket money out of these films that made in excess of $1 million US at the box office. So Weng Weng's story ended up becoming quite sad, and the Caballas, the producer's role in the Weng Weng story, started taking on quite a sinister edge to it. And the more I dug, the more horror stories I discovered about the way that he was treated, and just how disposable he was considered to his surrogate parent figures.
So did you go back to the Philippines many times after that?
Yeah. So almost immediately, I managed to somehow scrape together another plane fare because I knew that there was a story. I knew that there was way more to it than Boy Vignerow led on in that initial encounter. So I went back February 2007 and I found Weng Weng's brother. That was when he told me that Weng Weng was in fact dead, and he drove me to the house where he was born, which also happened to be the house where Weng Weng died, and then he drove me to the grave. And I was standing there, and you have no idea just how life-changing that moment was, where I was standing in front of the last resting place of Weng Weng after having obsessed about him for 15 years, and imagining what it would be like to stand at his grave. I managed, I don't know how, to find the one person who could drive me to the grave and make it happen. So this idea of manifesting bizarre ideas into reality, that suddenly became possible. And after spending 11 years in tight financial situation, never imagining that I would even go overseas, let alone to the Philippines, to go on this mad quest, somehow I'd made it happen. And I realized how incredibly lucky I was, because people gave me the opportunity to be able to realize that mad dream. And I think that is it's an ongoing pattern to the last 15 years of my life, of one, being able to manifest ideas into reality, and having people believe in those ideas enough to be able to make them happen.
That probably says something about your ideas, that people believe in them, no matter how
Right.
wild they are.
Right. Yeah. And I think that no one else is going to even bother. So I think if I don't do it, probably no one else will. No one will bother. And I think that idea of being so committed to something, to essentially sacrifice everything to realize a mad idea, resonates with a lot of people.
At what point did making the documentary become all-encompassing for you?
I think very, very soon after standing in front of the grave, I knew that I had the core of the story. Not knowing how to complete a documentary, I mean, that was a complete mystery to me. I sold the idea to a Brisbane-based producer, who then said we should be able to get ABC TV involved, either ABC or SBS. So I thought, right, here we go. It went to ABC. ABC said, oh, this is wonderful. Oh, right. Star of Escape from the Planet of the Tapes, Philippines, this is great. We love it. We love this idea so much that we're going to fire that guy from Escape from the Planet of the Tapes, because he's a bit of a twit, has clearly no idea what he's doing. And we'll get that nice young man from not quite Hollywood, golden boy of the funding bodies at the time. We'll get him to take over instead. And Weng Weng will be in there, but it'll be more about the Americans going to the Philippines to make films like Apocalypse Now. Or much better. Yeah. This Weng Weng thing's just stupid.
So nothing to do with your original idea and not including you?
Well, my name's still in the credits, if you look closely. So I learnt very quickly that funding bodies were not to be trusted. That if you were willing to jump through hoops to appease them, then you could be the golden boy of the funding bodies too. If you wanted to remain independent and see your projects through the way you want them to, you're going to have to go the hard path. And that is looking for money elsewhere through other channels.
Where did you find the money eventually?
It took, I think, about 3 years to get the rights back from the producer. So 2009 to 2012, Machete Maidens Unleashed had to basically do the festival circuit and then be sold to TV. Played on ABC a couple of times.
So this is the movie that came from the idea.
It came from Weng Weng.
Right.
But ended up evolving into something that I was clearly not involved with at all. And then I had to get the rights back for the Weng Weng project. And at the same time, a friend of mine was talking about crowdfunding, which I'd never really heard of, let alone considered before.
Although in a way, going back to like when you moved Trash Video, you had successfully crowdfunded the move to West End when you found the guy willing to invest 30 grand.
I never thought about that.
I mean, you send out, an email to all your customers. That's proto crowdfunding.
Yeah. And then got the one donor
Yeah.
that made it happen. Shit, I never thought about that. Thank you, Scott.
I guess these days, crowdfunding is usually associated with many people giving small amounts of money rather than finding one big donor. But
we got 333 contributors when we did a Kickstarter campaign to finish Search for Weng Weng. So if you can imagine that in 2013, I'd been talking about this damn thing since 2006. That was 7 years of me going, oh, look, I'm about to make a film. No, I'm not going to make a film. Now it's someone else's film. Now I'm really sad.
And in that time, Trash Video folded as well.
And as Mark was going to the Philippines to make my film, my dad died. Bobby Suarez, the director of Cleopatra Wong, died. And as a result of my dad dying and me resenting the fact that the shop had taken me away from my dad during his last months, I decided that enough was enough, that I was starting to hate the shop and decided to close it down. And around August 2010, all of a sudden, my worst fears were realized, that my function, my worth as a human was so tightly wound around that shop that had defined my personality, my utility for the last 15 years. I thought, if the shop dies, then my value will die, or my perceived value will die.
As this curator for the community of this the alternate culture.
Exactly. The video shop guy.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought, the phone's going to stop ringing. People are going to stop emailing me. I'm going to stop getting offers to do things if I close the shop. I think that's one of the reasons why I kept it going as long as I did. And that's why I was getting myself even deeper in debt, just because I didn't want the dream to end. And with it, the dream run of feeling worthwhile and you know. And then all of a sudden, the phone stopped ringing. And I stopped getting emails. I stopped getting offers to do things. And I think for the best part of 2 years, I sat in a flat in West End. I hardly went out, because when I did, I would see all my old customers who would suddenly get this look of pity on their face. And they go, oh, really sorry about the shop. You must be really down about it. I'm like, yep, really down about it, yep. Oh, yeah, sorry I didn't go into the shop for, the last 3 or 4 years of its existence, but I got, started downloading stuff, and I got Netflix, and I'm like, yeah, I used to see you around the corner at Video Easy, yeah. Well, good luck with everything. So I stopped going out, because that was like a knife in the heart every time I went out the front door. And it was too much. Anyway, eventually I thought, screw this. I've seen my film, my dream project, turn into someone else's film. I think after 2 years, I can safely say that the really savage mourning period of mourning the death of the shop and the death of my dad was coming to an end. I thought, fuck it. I'm just going to make another film. I mean, I pretty well know what to do now. I'd seen that whole process through. So I knew how to piece a documentary together by now. So I thought, right, I'm going to do a film about the Marcos family funding porn. It was one of the stories that I'd managed to procure during the research for Search for Weng Weng. So I thought, right, how am I going to do this? I'm going to find Imelda Marcos. How do I do that? Send it out on Facebook. Anybody know how to get hold of Imelda Marcos? Oh, I've got her press... Someone in the Philippines said, I've got her press agent's email. I get an email back. Oh, Mama Imelda has approved your visit, but you have to go to her birthday party. All of a sudden, I'm back in the Philippines with a camera going to Imelda Marcos's birthday party.
Former dictatorial first lady of the Philippines.
Former dictator of the Philippines, yeah. Who at the time kept her frozen husband in a glass coffin next to the family mansion in Ilocos Norte. So there I was, I thought, right, I am going to talk to her about porn. And I did. And then at the end of this hour-long, conversation out of the fucking Twilight Zone, I thought, I'm just going to throw in a question about Weng Weng. I said, what do you remember about Weng Weng? She went, the midget? I said, yeah, the midget. He made us laugh. Turns out that Weng Weng used to go to the palace, the presidential palace, almost like a court jester, and used to hang out with the president's son, Bong Bong. And she came out with this amazing speech about him having almost nothing, but still giving. And he entertained us. He made us laugh. He had nothing, but he gave so much. What a talent. I salute. I was looking at Danny, my, co-producer, looking at each other going, oh my God, this is the money shot. If we were ever to resurrect Search for Weng Weng, we got Imelda Marcos talking about Weng Weng. And then she goes, oh, I'll just take you to the presidential center next door. And we're like, no, she's not. Oh my God, she's showing us the fucking dead body. All of a sudden we're in this concrete bunker and there was Ferdinand's body, in a glass coffin, lying surrounded by dying flowers, and there's funereal music over the top of this hum of the air conditioners that were trying to keep his body, from melting. And my friend Roy filmed that entire scene with an iPhone. We were not supposed to be filming, but he managed to get it all on the phone. And I turned to Danny and I said, no, that is the money shot. If we were to ever put that film together, that shows just how deep down the rabbit hole we have gone in our search for the story of a long dead midget.
Did Imelda Marcos, did she like you? Did she know you were coming to talk to her about pornography?
Oh yeah. She had to approve the list of questions, so she knew. But she also took it as an opportunity to state her case. So a lot of what she told us was very self-serving stuff about how she'd done nothing wrong, and it was all a conspiracy against her, to drive her out of power. And we're like, yeah, but can we talk about pornography now? 16 lawyers paid to bring down the house of Marcos. I'm like, yeah, but the porn. Anyway, so we're now finishing that film off. The Marcos is funding porn. And if all goes well, I'll be in the Philippines in 2 weeks, finishing that off for a 2020 release.
So are you going to use the footage you shot then for the new one as well?
Oh, sure.
And that was in Search for Weng Weng, ultimately.
Well, the Weng Weng
stuff.
question was, yeah. But the rest of the interview, she talks quite candidly about state-sanctioned pornography. And it's brilliant. I've got a daughter as well talking about, how they were making art. Just happened to be pornographic. But it was also the great distraction for the population, in the failing years of their dictatorship, where they needed something to make them feel alive, because grinding poverty had finally got to the point where people were starting to turn against 20 something years of the Marcoses in power, and they discovered that pornography was just what the doctor ordered. Let them eat porn.
So ultimately, you get the rights back for the Weng Weng film,
Right?
And how did you
Yeah,
finish?
with the confidence of having Imelda in the can, and a friend of mine, Drew, talking seriously about putting a successful Kickstarter campaign together, we then went on the trail. Banged the can for 2 months, doing screenings up and down Australia. With a big tub that people were throwing money into, and raised $34,000 to finish the film. And almost immediately, I was back in Manila, shooting more footage to go in the finished film. And my God, the search for Weng Weng, as I originally imagined it, even before it went to ABC, I was able to put together the film that I hoped that I was going to be able to make. I mean, it took 7 years longer than I thought it would, but there it was. And in fact, if I had have brought out the film back in 2006, 2007, when I wanted to, it would have been, not even a quarter of the film that it is now. It needed that extra time to percolate.
So you finally had a film that was done to your satisfaction.
Yeah,
ultimately.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a film that I'm incredibly proud of. It's a film that I think I've watched about 150 times with audiences all over the world, like literally all over the world, and I don't get sick of it, and wouldn't, aside for a frame here or there, I wouldn't change it.
And people get this movie.
Yeah, yeah. For a scrappy little DIY project, that was funded entirely outside of the funding system, and for a remarkably obscure subject, it's got legs, and it's not just legs attached to a 2'9" James Bond. It came out on DVD in Sweden. Rotterdam Film Festival played it, and now it's about to go on their streaming platform. So you're going to be able to see it in Holland through Rotterdam Film Festival. Got a DVD release in US, UK, Australia, of course. It's played at, I think, about 60 film festivals around the place, and I've been to probably about 30 of those film festivals. So it's my first overground film. I mean, everything that I'd done leading up to it was an experiment. Maybe not a very successful one, but I was learning the craft, and I was testing my voice. And I think with Search for Weng Weng, I finally found my voice, and I found a style. And I also found a genre of documentary, which I'd never really considered before. I always wanted to do, crazy action and horror films. And now all of a sudden I've got a G-rated documentary that makes my mum cry because she's so touched by the story,
And you put together a book as well?
And then I wrote the book version, which was, the documentary material multiplied tenfold. All the stuff that I'd uncovered since the documentary came out, all the research material leading up to the documentary, a travelogue, behind the scenes stories. That one I'm also incredibly proud of as well. I mean, it's like it's the twin. I had twins. One took a couple of years longer to come out of the womb, but the book and documentary, they're definitely twins, and I'm equally proud of them.
And so you've been on the road, like around the world,
Yeah.
for quite a while, getting the film and the book out there.
Right. I mean, I made another documentary in between back in 2015, but that took 7 months. Search for Weng Weng took 7 years. Last Pinoy Action King took 7 months, and that was it was essentially that was a commission job from a dead actor's family.
And was that off the back of Weng Weng? Like they
Yeah.
saw what you did with that?
Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah. Saw that we could make something for nothing, and they gave us even less. That was a yeah. I think the budget ended up something less than 25,000 Australian. That's crazy. I don't know how we managed to do that, but we looked at it as practice. And this next budget is substantially higher. The one for the sexy Marcos one, substantially higher than that. Still low by Australian standards, but in the Philippines, we know how to get more bang for your buck. And then at the same time, I'm shooting another documentary in Melbourne about Fred Negro and the old St Kilda music scene called Pub. That's in 1,000 pieces as well. I'm just looking for a private investor to be able to finish that one. None of the films that I do, I think, are likely to go through the funding bodies because I'm not going to take them to them. I don't trust them. After the whole Search for Weng Weng fiasco, I know that it's all about control. And I have a very tight grasp on my projects. I don't want to lose that creative freedom, because once you start tooling it to please the funding bodies, its essential nature changes. Just like Search for Weng Weng into Machete Maidens Unleashed, it was the film that I used to joke that we were making, not quite Manila wood.
What about like streaming services? Are they throwing any money at local documentaries?
I think they are. We've screened Weng Weng on one Australian streaming service. Thing is, I don't think it's really unless you're going to Netflix. Netflix are commissioning films from scratch. Streaming services like Stan, for instance, I think take on finished films and don't really have the budget to be able to put together, 200, 300,000 to complete a film. So if you want money like that, you usually have to go to Screen Australia or Screen Queensland, Film Victoria, and go cap in hand and expect your film to change.
Did you consider going to Netflix? Do they change things as well?
I haven't thought about going to Netflix yet. I don't think that any of my films are really Netflix friendly yet. They may be down the track, but I don't think Fred Negro is really something that Netflix would want on there. But Stam might take it if it's a finished product.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know they've been throwing a bit of money at local comedy things, but they're pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Short.
Yeah. To do a feature of any length, you're looking at, a couple of $100,000 to start with, and then all the way up to expensive documentaries are $4 million, and I don't think I'm ever going to see money like that. I'm the video shop guy. There is a perception out there that I should know my place.
Oh, right. That because you can work magic on a small budget that you don't have.
But ultimately, I'm still that video shop guy, who thinks he's a filmmaker. And I've encountered that from time to time. There is a look of disbelief on people's faces that the video shop guy would even dare go out of his little box and try to think bigger.
That must dissipate at a certain point, though, because you're...
I'm hoping so. I'm really hoping so.
I mean, just because you're going so far beyond the scene where you came from of, the Brisbane punk rock valley scene, like you're getting out, you're getting on DVDs in Sweden and stuff. Like,
right.
These people don't know that part about you.
No, of course not.
They just know you as the Weng Weng documentarian.
Yeah.
How many times have you been to the Philippines in the last 10 years?
Since 2006, I'm up to about 23 visits, I think.
Have you grown to really love the country?
Oh, yeah, it's my second home. I would say that if I could, I would spend half a year there. Half a year here, at least 3 months of the year in the Philippines. I mean, I spend up to about 2 or 3 months out of each year there anyway. So I know how to navigate around. I know most of the film industry over there. And, I was talking about before about people having a very limited perception of what you do. I mean, I can't get a gig most of the time in Australia, but the Philippines sees value in what I do. So it's a little sad that I can exist in almost total anonymity in my own hometown now, and yet I go to the Philippines and I'm treated like I'm worth a shit. It's starting to bug me a little that I just can't get a modicum of the respect that I seem to get in the Philippines. I can't get that here in Australia. And I'm sure that's mostly my fault because I'm not putting myself out there. But even when I do, I'm still shackled by people's perceptions of me being the B-grade guy. That there's little more to me other than cheap sensation or flippant, glib commentary. You know what I mean? But in the Philippines, I was able to reinvent myself. They don't have the baggage of me being that counter monkey. So that's probably one reason why I do spend a lot of time in the Philippines, because I actually feel like I'm doing good work there.
Do you feel safe there in the current political climate?
I'm as safe as I will be in any country that has rough edges. We are in such a safe country here that it's almost comatose. I mean, I tend to spend a lot of time in countries like Cambodia. I'm going back to Mexico in about 6 weeks, even though I was there this time last year and I got robbed. I'm still going back there, even though it's one of the most dangerous cities in the goddamn world. But you feel alive in it. You do have to be a lot more sensible than I was, having my wallet in the back of my jeans as I got off the plane onto a subway train, and then found the $1,500 I'd made from the US book tour vanish in a heartbeat. I mean, this time I'm going to be putting my money in my front pocket and hoping they don't come along with a box cutter and slice my leg open.
When something like that happens, like last year when you're robbed, and that,
right,
which must have been a gigantic setback, like everything you'd worked for in that whole book tour.
Oh yeah,
gone. Just like there's, there's moments when, like you might forget something at home that you need when you go out, and you get to the place, and it's like, oh man, now my whole day's ruined. I have to go home, and it'll take like half an hour to get there and get back. There's that sense of, oh dear. And then there's this sense of losing something like that.
Well, when you spend 3 weeks going around US and Canada and really earning every dollar that you make from selling books, auctioning off bobbleheads, basically banging the can and trying desperately to have more money leaving town than when you first got there. I mean, I was sleeping on fucking Greyhound buses to save money on hotels. I would turn up 9 o'clock looking totally disheveled. I would sit in a Starbucks. I'd load up on, one coffee an hour until it was time for showtime. And then I would have to be on, and flogging the 23 kilo brick of books that was in my backpack, hoping that they don't run out before the next book drop, in the next city. And I had $1,500 plus my credit card in my wallet. Man, I was feeling happy. because I'd earned that money. But that was all the money I had in the world, other than my credit card debt. And then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, I had nothing. Oh, that's not true. I had 17 pesos in coins in my pocket. So I went to my hostel that had already been prepaid by my hosts. I thought, right, go down, get a coffee, get on Facebook, tell everyone what's happened. They said, that'll be 25 pesos for the coffee, thanks. I thought, fuck, I can't even afford a cup of coffee. And that was all the money I had in the world at that moment. So I was down and out in Mexico City, drinking water out of the faucet because I couldn't afford a coffee. So I went upstairs to the free Wi-Fi and I got on Facebook and went, help. Within half an hour, I had a few friends saying, we'll wire you the money that you need. Don't panic. So again, I crowdsourced my theft.
You know, you thought pretty rationally and got out of that situation and had people, you know, who could help you.
I had a
out.
network of friends and sympathizers who went, yeah, I can imagine this happening to you. Not a problem. Just pay us back when you can.
But I imagine that how people would deal with that situation would depend very much on their disposition. Like,
Right.
did you go into a rage? Did you
No.
just break?
Oh, no. I mean, I blamed myself. I mean, it was my own stupid fault for getting on a crowded Mexican subway with my wallet in my back pocket. I mean, I felt like the world's biggest idiot. But I also realized that it was all about perception. How I reacted to this was now about to color the next 3 days in Mexico City. My default setting would be to go into a very deep low and find it almost impossible to get out of that because I know what I'm like. So I thought, all right, change your perception. You're in Mexico City. You have friends who are happy to help out. You are not alone. You have your hosts who are ready to roll out the red carpet for you. Embrace the chaos. And after a bit of a, oh shit, 10 minutes of feeling sorry for myself, I thought, okay, change your perception. And I ended up having the best 3 days in Mexico City. I grasped opportunities with both hands. I grabbed the horns of opportunity with both hands. I did my book launch that night. I did a screening the following night in an art gallery in Coyoacán, the artsy part of Mexico City. They put on a beer full of fridge and mezcal for me. And then the last night was Day of the Dead. I wandered around Mexico City seeing 3 million Mexico City inhabitants, decked out in their Day of the Dead gear. And it was brilliant. And I said to my hosts, apart from a shaky start, this has been unreal. Let's do it again. So they're bringing me back because I didn't let, something temporary color my entire adventure. I mean, you have to make allowances for stupid shit.
That's pretty fucking amazing that you could do that.
I forced myself to do that though. And I can imagine that if I wasn't feeling as positive as I am about things right now, I could have slid into a very deep funk. But I chose, and it's a choice. You can choose how to react to any given situation. I chose to not react negatively. And it's a lesson. I'm now applying that to the last 12 months where I've been, between jobs, and I haven't let it get me down. I know that there is another adventure around the corner. I know there's another film to make. I know there's another project to realize. And even though the path I've chosen is quite a thorny one, and there are long periods where there is no money, it's still ultimately preferable than being tied to a job that you hate just to pay off a mortgage to a house that you really don't want, and to mortgage your soul for a life that you end up resenting. So I've chosen, large periods of poverty, and I've chosen a life of adventure and creativity. There's a trade-off. The trade-off is people sometimes write you off as a joke, or they look at you and think you're a bum. But ultimately, I'm going to Mexico, man. You know what I mean? Going to fucking Mexico to do a film festival. I'm about to go back to Manila to talk at a film conference. Even though I can't get a film conference gig here in Australia, Philippines wants me. So that's something.
That's amazing, Andrew. And thank you for talking and telling this. Like, someone's got to make the search for Leavold at one point, right?
Oh, God help them. I found him and I threw him back.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
It's been a pleasure, Scott.
If you want to hear Andrew talk more about cult cinema, he's just started a new podcast with a few mates of his. It's called Trash Humpers, and the first episode is up now. There's plenty of Andrew-related film stuff up on YouTube. You can see his short film, Bluebirds of Peace and Destruction, some old snippets from Schlock Treatment, the Escape from the Planet of the Tapes documentary. It's all up there. The book and DVD of The Search for Weng Weng can be found on Amazon, and it can also be rented on the streaming platform Ozflix. Andrew's blog, andrewleavold.blogspot.com, is also an exhaustive historical archive of just about everything he's ever done, if you want to check that out. Notes for this episode, just to clear up what happened in the case of the infamous West End vampire murder. So it did happen in Orley Park in 1989. The ringleader of the murder, who drank the victim's blood, Tracy Wigginton, served 21 years in prison for murder before being released on parole in 2012. Thanks for listening to this episode. This is the 44th episode of this podcast, so we have plenty of back episodes if it's the first one. If you like this episode, you might also enjoy the following Brisbane iconoclasts I've had on previous episodes, such as Lisa Kundi from the bands Gravel Rash and Coco Uzi in episode 8, Tim Stewart and Kelly Lloyd from Screen Theatre in episodes 17 and 27 respectively, Dale Peachy from Dollar Bar in episode 20, and Ian Rogers from Iron On and No Anchor in episodes 35 and 36, plus heaps and heaps more. If you want to hear me play some music on the radio, I'm on 4ZZZ in Brisbane. That's 102.1 FM, Saturdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Also streaming online, if you want to check that out. I have a gig. One of these busy things I've been doing. You can actually come and see the fruits of one of these projects. I have a gig with Adele Pickvance and the Chandeliers. We're playing at Betty's Espresso in West End on November the 3rd, along with June Lowe, Peter Wilson Green, and Ash Curley. And I'm delighted to announce that my frequent past musical collaborator, Ash Shanahan, from the very first episode of this podcast, has now joined the band on drums. So come along to that. It'll be fun. You can find the podcast on Instagram at Gimme Empathy Podcast and send me an email at gimmeempathypodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, stay mystical.